This is 100% independent, non-corporatized journalism, and we need your help to keep acting out. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/actout. This week on Act Out, can you see me from your digital filter bubble? The scary thing is you probably don't even realize that everything that you see online is in fact filtered. We dive into the various kinds of online censorship that are shaping our ever more narrowed worldview. Up next, what women learn from the patriarchy's ills. And finally, no NAFTA. A ghost from trade deals past is back, and so is the fight for fair trade over free trade. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out.
Rockets! Blockade! Bulldozers swarm outside the checkpoint gate. An orange flash broke the hush and blew me into the street. I awoke next to the body of my baby. No!
Coming to you from the Uptown Art House in D.C. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. In times of deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. And nothing gets the powers that be off quite like thwarting revolutionary acts. While those endeavors take many shapes, in the digital age, perhaps one of the most powerful manifestations may look something like Google and Facebook redacting reality and slashing traffic to progressive news sites. Traffic that these sites depend on to not only keep readers informed, but also to earn a living and thereby keep reporting. So let's step back and consider that for a second. For many of us these days, we're largely dependent on whatever stories Facebook sends our way, or what Google chooses to show us on the first page of results. Because you and I both know, unless you're really digging deep, you hardly ever go to that second page, and the third or fourth page of Google results might as well not exist. But did you know that my first page of Google and your first page of Google don't look the same? Indeed, even before we get to outright censorship of progressive news sites, Google, and Facebook for that matter, are tailoring your online search results and news feeds. Eli Pariser, author of The Filter Bubble, said in a TED Talk several years ago, "There is no standard Google anymore." One engineer told me there are 57 signals that Google looks at, everything from what kind of computer you're on to what kind of browser you're using to where you're located, that it uses to personally tailor your query results. The internet is showing us what it thinks we want to see, but not necessarily what we need to see. Pariser goes on to point out that not only do we not get a say in what is edited out of our online world, we therefore don't even know what it is that's been edited out. He gives an example of two different friends who Googled the word Egypt right around the time of the Arab Spring uprisings. One friend got links to news on the uprisings, and the other friend got tourism info. Not a damn whisper about the revolution that took an entire nation by storm. And again, even before we get to the issue of the pointed censorship of left-leaning alternative media sites, this insidious filter bubbling is a different kind of censorship that's been going on for years, redacting parts or even huge chunks of reality. No wonder there are people who think that the worst thing to happen in Paris since the French Revolution is the fact that fucking Kim Kardashian got robbed. Though you may be thinking, well, I don't need to see search results outside of my particular purview because I already know what's happening. I'm woke. Well, shit, that is a dangerous and stagnant paradigm to adopt. Think of it from the other side, so to speak. Someone who believes that trans people are just confused pedophiles, that black people are inherently less intelligent or more violent than white people. They do a Google search on some racist bullshit, and all they see are articles supporting their paradigm. They log on to Facebook, and all they see are fascist people and groups and pages that agree with them. It's pretty frightening, isn't it? And let me be clear that it isn't just white supremacists who need to question their ideologies. We all do. Because if we don't, how the hell will you be open to new facts and information, new ideas and concepts, new perspectives? I've been an activist for 15 years, but I've definitely changed significantly since I went to my first protest. Necessarily so. And one cannot change or evolve by standing in a digital echo chamber, which is what makes this filter bubbling so frightening. It keeps us cocooned without our consent, without our even perhaps wanting to be. Another example, let's say that you use Facebook to connect primarily with environmental groups, but then Facebook removes all the racial justice news from your feed, even though you still actually want to hear from those pages. Or a Hillary supporter Googles Hillary Clinton and finds nothing but great reviews of her latest book, and nothing about Saudi weapons deals, Clinton Foundation fiascos in Haiti, etc., etc., which, by the way, was very much a thing during the election cycle last year. And so they, we, you, me, remain in the mindset of being right, of knowing all there is to know because we fucking Googled it. Meanwhile, Bernie supporters don't see evidence of his less than stellar foreign policy platform. Anti-vaxxers don't see the arguments being made suggesting that, yes, maybe some vaccines are actually good. Pro-vaxxers don't raise the question as to why their kids now have to get 3 times more vaccines than they did. And most Americans don't see evidence of our role in proxy wars across the world, and so on and so on and so forth. In short, if your ideas are merely created and crafted from memes and only bolstered by belief and digital thumbs up, you don't have a firm grasp of reality. If you aren't basing your socio-political stance on facts, information, and knowledge taken from outside the confines of your curated digital experience, you need a proverbial kick in the mind. A kick in the mind that Google and Facebook would rather that you weren't subjected to. And to give you an idea of what that algorithm bubble looks like, Facebook has roughly 2 billion active monthly users, making it the most powerful social media site in the world. Close behind, YouTube, owned by Google, boasts 1.5 billion monthly users, making these 2 behemoths the go-to platforms for everything from cat videos to, yes, your window into the world, your understanding of what's happening out there, from Syria to Standing Rock, from the Gulf to Gaza. And if we take this filter bubbling and then add to that the crackdown on progressive and left-leaning media sites, we have a frightening level of redaction that narrows an already narrow-minded purview, hiding a reality that we can only seek to better by embracing the fucked facts. After an election that was disastrous for not just the whole country, but also for the Democratic political establishment, there was an outcry against so-called fake news, a term seemingly equally beloved by the center-left as it is by Donald Trump himself. The liberal leadership claimed that viral stories replete with falsehoods about Hillary Clinton and other Democratic candidates, many of them spread by trolls in Russia, had played a decisive role in tipping the election towards Trump. And yet this is absolutely real, infallible, spot-on journalistic integrity. Anywho, in response to cries from deep state and the powers that be, Google announced in April that it would be correcting its algorithm to weed out the so-called low-quality news sites and what it called conspiracy theories. But it didn't just crack down on articles with headlines like Michelle Obama gives birth to 2-headed gay Muslim baby, or the InfoWars-type sites that tell you to buy vitamins and ready the nuclear bomb shelter. Oh no. Legitimate and respected progressive and left-leaning news sites have seen their traffic plummet in recent months simply for refusing to toe the mainstream Democratic Party line on issues. Alternet, for example, created a graph to show how the Google crackdown has affected them, writing that, quote, almost overnight, we lost roughly 1.2 million readers. Those numbers are insane. In a recent article, Alternet quotes famed British journalist Sir Harold Evans in calling Google and Facebook the Harvey and Irma of journalism and democracy. Whatever else they do, the electronic duopoly deprive millions of information and argument as surely as the series of superstorms deprive millions of light, power, home, and hearth. Which again circles back to the previous point about these media behemoths creating a filter bubble where huge swaths of reality are redacted to quote-unquote streamline your digital experience. But again, even more disturbing is that these media companies are now deciding who gets to be considered real news to even be considered for the pool of posts to potentially show up in your goddamn news feed. Redact, block, censor, repeat. And the people advising them on this are hardly unbiased towards the anti-establishment left. Snopes and PolitiFact have come under fire on more than one occasion for using questionable sources and spinning angles in order to make the person or story that they're fact-checking seem either undesirable or desirable. For example, Bill Clinton said Glass-Steagall repeal had nothing to do with financial crisis. PolitiFact marked that mostly true. What? The argument made by PolitiFact author Lauren Carroll is that Travelers and Citicorp merged into Citigroup before the repeal, before Clinton signed the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. But sorry, the merger did not officially go through legally until Glass-Steagall was repealed, as noted by none other than fucking Wall Street Journal. April 6, 1998, Sandy Weill and John Reed announce a stock swap merging Travelers and Citicorp to create Citigroup, Inc., the world's largest financial services company. There's one catch. The marriage couldn't last unless Congress repealed the Depression-era Glass-Steagall Act, which forbid the mixing of insurance underwriting, securities underwriting, and commercial banking. After strenuous lobbying by Weill and Reed, among many others, Congress repealed the law in late '99, with the backing of the Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan and the Clinton administration. Well, maybe we can cut PolitiFact some slack. Maybe their filter bubble just didn't show any results from Wall Street Journal. Further debunking the fact checker, while we can't sit here and say that repealing Glass-Steagall was the only reason that our economy tanked, history, and particularly economic history, is never so cut and dry. What Glass-Steagall did do was set a precedent for how big banks, and now huge banks, operate. They were able to exert undue influence over the rating agencies like Standard & Poor's and Moody's. Because the market relies on ratings, when these agencies were compromised, it undermined the market, allowed for the subprime derivatives market to grow, and ensured that companies like AIG took on more risk than they should have. And this is just one example of how PolitiFact attempted to shine the dynastic turd that is the Clinton family. In February of 2016, PolitiFact ran 14 statements from each Democratic candidate, awarding Clinton with only 1 false ranking and Bernie with 4, mostly false or false. Meanwhile, the other Facebook fact checker, ABC News, covered Bernie Sanders for a grand total of 0.3 minutes in all of 2015. By the way, Sanders announced his candidacy on April 30th, 2015, in case you're wondering. Meanwhile, ABC covered Clinton's campaign for a total of 35 minutes and Trump's for an astonishing 121 minutes. And this is not to say that Bernie represents the anti-establishment left. This is merely pointing out that those in charge of keeping us safe from falsehoods in the news are the ones peddling bullshit and pedestaling the likes of Trump. And this fact-checking facade of honest journalism is then shared by Google, our vehicle to the vast digital information world. World Socialist website, one of the affected websites, was among the first to report on the effect of these changes to the Google algorithm in an investigative journalism piece published in July. Using the broad and amorphous category of fake news, the aim of the change to Google's search system is to restrict access to alternative websites, whose coverage and interpretation of events conflict with those of such establishment media outlets as the New York Times and the Washington Post. By flagging content in such a way that it does not appear in the first 1 or 2 pages of a search result, Google is able to effectively block users' access to it. Given the fact that vast amounts of web traffic are influenced by search results, Google is able to effectively conceal or bury content to which it objects through the manipulation of search rankings. And like Alternet, the World Socialist website reported that the effect on their traffic had been devastating. While they'd received over 422,000 visits via Google in April, by July their traffic from Google's searches plummeted to about 120,000, a loss of more than 70%. And those are but 2 examples of respected news sites, others being Truth Out, peace sites like Antiwar.com, and even relatively mainstream human rights groups like Amnesty International and the ACLU have seen their visitors from Google slashed. And while all of this is frightening and disturbing on several levels, all is not lost. In a future episode, we will talk about how you can be safer and more private online, and detaching ourselves from Google can be a big part of the solution. DuckDuckGo is a free search engine that's an alternative to Google, which uses a lot of the same data, but does not keep extensive records of your searches like Google does. You can access that by going to duckduckgo.com and get apps to add it to your phone. Minds is an alternative to Facebook that has been growing in popularity recently due to its decentralized and information-secure model. You can sign up for that at minds.com. But for now, and just as importantly, you can help alternative, non-corporatized journalism stay alive by supporting the sites that provide the news that matters to you. Get in the habit of visiting their websites directly on a daily basis instead of depending on Facebook or Google to show you their headlines. Sign up for their newsletters so you get headlines in your inbox. Share your favorite stories, not just on Facebook, but directly with friends and family. I know, these days it can seem like everyone is passing the hat, whether they're funding legal defense for arrested activists or raising money for life-saving surgery. Even so, it is also vitally important that we financially support independent media and individual independent journalists with our wallets as well. Because here's the thing. We know that fans of shows like this one want to create a healthier, more sustainable, and more humane world. But we can't do that without the radical journalists that bring us the stories that other outlets are afraid to touch. And they can't bring us those stories without our support, financially and in ways that combat censorship. In the battle for the future of all media, we are all on the front lines. I learned to move to the other side of the street. I learned to hold my keys between my knuckles and say, "Excuse me, please, let me through." I learned to carry alarms and mini bottles of mace like charms on a bracelet. I learned to walk the longer way home, even though alleyways cut down the distance. I learned resistance to logic in the face of fear. I learned that my body is a battleground where men may lay siege with their various creeds, their right to use me, to touch me, to grope me, and take me as they please. To cover at will, hide all the curves and the lines that thrill their frail minds. To use my ovaries as pedestals for prestige. To leave a cold cross in the warmth of autonomy. An anatomy sacred, this giver of life has her own life. This vagina mine isn't built to breed proles, isn't set to your roles, isn't under control of the state. It isn't up for grabs, and it doesn't know how to fight back, but I do. Because I have learned that I have to. Because my vagina is innocent, but my mind is not. My body is pure. The hands that have wronged me, the words that have sliced me, have not etched their hate in my skin. Their echoes live within. And I have learned that my body is a battleground, as pure as the valleys that hold men's bones, where wars waged did stage their fleeting raids. But the spring made rains and the flowers soon came. The winds left mere specters of evil in the fresh blades of grass. And likewise, it passed. And I have now learned that the helpless anger of a forced battleground can then sound of power. The power of nature that batters small men. The power of earth that rises again. I have learned all the ills that the patriarchy instills, and I will never submit. So before we wrap up this week, I want to briefly mention NAFTA. But Eleanor, that's so 23 years ago. Kind of, not really. NAFTA, the trade deal signed between US, Canada, and Mexico, has left in its wake a trail of obliterated economies, thanks to placing corporate profits over the rights of both people and planet. Now, for those of you familiar with the show, you may recall from our TPP coverage a segment or two on ISDS, the investor-state dispute settlement. Basically what this means is that corporations can sue countries, actual countries, whenever a change in policy interferes with a company's profit-making plans. Companies are allowed to drag governments before closed-door tribunals operated by the World Bank, the International Chamber of Commerce, and others. Companies can force compensation not only for the funds they actually invested, but for many, many times more than that for supposed lost profits. That is, in fact, exactly what TransCanada did after Obama announced that he wouldn't be signing off on the second half of the Keystone XL pipeline. For a cool $15 billion, TransCanada sued the United States of America for loss of profits, and the invoked instrument in the case brought by TransCanada against the U.S. was, drumroll please, NAFTA. And there's plenty more where that came from. Indeed, all you need to do is check out this bit.ly link below. That's bit.ly/ISDS in action to find a long list of corporations suing countries for loss of profits. Welcome to the New World Order. And the reason that this matters now and not just 23 years ago when NAFTA was originally signed is that it's coming up again. Renegotiations have already started taking place, the most recent of which happened last Wednesday in Arlington, just outside of D.C. Standing outside the Arlington Sheraton and across the street from a big sign reading NAFTA, fix it or nix it, a group of protesters called for democracy, not corporatocracy. Activists who organized against the TPP explained why they were now setting their sights on the NAFTA renegotiations. The NAFTA negotiations are being held in secrecy. The public is not allowed to see the texts of the negotiations, which have historically been heavily influenced and drafted by corporate lobbyists. With the pace of these negotiations, we are concerned that negotiators are slipping in the worst parts of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, meaning worse conditions for our communities and our environment. We want to see a trade process that is open, transparent, and inclusive, that the text isn't solely written with input from corporations, but for civil society to have input so that we can make sure that these are policies that are well thought out and do not have a negative impact on our communities, like the last version of NAFTA did. We'll be covering more on the NAFTA negotiations and your response. So to get activated in this new corporate power fight, visit flushthetpp.org. And to wrap up this week's Dose of Dissent, here is a view from those front lines.
We need to be out at every single negotiation, letting them know that this is not okay for them to trade away our future, to trade away our safety, to trade away our health. And if you want to get involved, please go to tradeforpeopleandplanet.org and sign up. We're doing Twitter storms. People are doing actions locally to say and put pressure on their members of Congress to fight back. We don't want a new NAFTA 2 that's worse than the devastating NAFTA that we already have. This is basically being done by, corporate lobbyists writing the language of this new agreement that's going to impact all of us. So we're really upset about the lack of transparency that's going on in this process and the fact that they won't release the text. So we're going to be calling on them to release the text. We also don't like the fact that they're slipping in the worst parts of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, to give more power to corporations to exploit our communities, our workers, and the planet. So we're calling for democracy, not corporatocracy. They're trying to put in place corporate courts that will be worse than what we currently have. Corporations, if they want to come into a community and build a polluting industry, they want to extract energy or minerals, they want to take the water and bottle it and sell it, they will be able to do that if communities stand up to them and say, no, you can't do that in our community. They can sue those communities for loss of expected profits. And so that's something that communities can't afford, the billions of dollars that these corporations can make from stealing from them. And so the communities generally end up either not trying to fight them or they just give in and allow them to come in and exploit them. So we don't want corporate courts coming in. Our government should be here to protect the health and safety of people in their communities. Our government should be protecting the rights of workers and making sure they have living wages and safe working conditions. Our government should be making sure that we're protecting the planet and not worsening the climate crisis. So all these things that our government should be doing, they won't be able to do if this NAFTA 2 renegotiation goes through. So we're outside to say no NAFTA 2. And instead what we would like to see is trade agreements used as a way to actually build stronger relationships between countries that are based on mutual respect. We'd like to see trade agreements that lift up wages and the rights of workers all around the world, not just in the United States, because we understand that if you exploit workers somewhere, it impacts all workers around the world. We also want to see a trade process which is open and transparent and inclusive and allows not just corporate CEOs to be writing it, but communities to have input, civil society groups to have input, so that they can make sure that these are policies that are thought out and don't have negative impacts on our communities. So that's why we're here today.
I'm not a fighter.